In the last two videos, we've met for loops and while loops, and we've seen some of the things that they can do. In this video, we're going to introduce a new idea called nesting loops. We are going to put a loop inside of another loop to enable us to do some additional things. As just a simple example, let's display a block of smiley faces. So this block is 10 smiley faces across and 10 lines down. To do that, let's actually start with the simplest item and work our way out to make it more complicated. So let's start with just a single smiley face. To do that, we're going to just call system.out.print. I've just shortened that to print here and print out a smiley face. If we want to display 10 of those in a row, what we're going to do is we're going to have a loop where we repeat that 10 times. And hopefully you've seen a for loop and you've seen a while loop. Hopefully it's pretty clear which of these two those should be. Should this be a for loop or a while loop? So I'll give you a second to think about that. And the answer is to use a for loop because we know exactly how many times we want to repeat this, 10 times. So we put this in a loop. We're going to each time print a smiley face. And when we're done, it's probably a good idea to print a new line there so any additional input doesn't happen next to the smiley faces, it happens below it. Now how do we turn this into a big block of smiley faces? Well, we take our task, repeating this 10 times and printing one line of smiley faces, and we repeat that 10 times. When we're done with that, we'll just continue with the rest of our program. So if this displays one line of smiley faces, and I do that 10 times, it's going to display a block of 10 by 10 smiley faces. So let's turn this into code. Let's go back to our very beginning. We want to print a single smiley face. That's really easy. System.out.print and a smiley face. To repeat that 10 times, again, that should be a for loop. So we're going to put for. Normally we've been using a variable like counter. A lot of times programmers will use the variable I as a counter in their for loop. And that seems like it breaks our rules. A variable is supposed to tell you with its name what it's doing. So something like counter would help us know that we're using it to count how many times we're going through our for loop. But because it's standard to use I as a counting variable in a for loop, it actually does communicate that to you anyways. I should not be used in any other context, just to count in a for loop. And so when we see I, we immediately know, oh yeah, that's counting in a for loop. If you have a second for loop and you can't use I again, you might use J or K or L and so on. But typically if we just have a single for loop, we'll use I. So in this case, we've just put our print statement inside of a for loop to repeat this 10 times. When we're done, we want to print a new line character so that that's the end of our line, and we can just add system.out.println here to do that. Then we want to take this block and repeat that 10 times. Well, that is just as simple as putting a new for loop outside of that. So our old for loop is now the body. That thing that prints one line is going to get repeated 10 times by running the outside for loop. Now typically we'd use J as the variable here. In PowerPoint with this font, J looks almost identical to I. So I decided to use K instead. But we've got a very similar for loop. We're starting with I, going up to 10, adding 1 each time. And this will do exactly what we want it to do. The outside for loop says do the inside thing 10 times. The inside for loop says print out a line of 10 smiley faces. So let's see that code in action. I've copied and pasted that into Eclipse. The only thing I've done is I've added a couple of comments here to help us keep the for loop separate. So the first for loop is in charge of displaying 10 lines, and the inside for loop is in charge of displaying one line, and that'll happen 10 times to create this block. So to create one line, we do 10 smiley faces and then a print line. The other thing I've done is I've changed this back to a J. So it was K in the PowerPoint because it was really hard to see a J as being different from an I. I want the example that you've got up on Canvas to correctly have an I in one loop and a J in the other. Normally if we have one loop after another, we can use I for both of those. But if one loop is inside of another, then we can't use I for both. We need I for one and J for the other. And let's run this and see how it goes. So I'll click run. And sure enough, if I make this bigger, we've got a nice big block of 10 smiley faces by 10 smiley faces. Let's see something else we can do. I've created a separate file called multiplication table, and this is the exact same code in it. We're just going to adjust this we want to just print out a multiplication table on our screen. So instead of displaying a block of smiley faces, we want to display a block of numbers. If it's the third row in the fourth column, we'll display 3 times 4. Well, it turns out this works really well. J is keeping track of what row we're on. If J is 1, we're in the first row. If J is 2, we're in the second row. I is keeping track of which column we're in. If I is 1, we're displaying the first column, and originally the first smiley face. If I is 2, it was the second smiley face, but it means that's the second column. So let's just try to print I times J. This isn't going to quite work. We'll see when we run this. We get just a whole big pile of numbers, and what we're seeing is that there's no spaces between here. So it is displaying 1 times 1, 1 times 2, 1 times 3, but they're all squished together. Let's put a space. It's still not going to be great. So here you can see the multiplication table. 6 times 4, 4 we can kind of follow down here, and 6 times 4 is 24. But this doesn't quite line up because some of the numbers are 1 digit, some of the numbers are 2 digits, and there's even a 3-digit number in here. This is really something where we need printf. So let's change this to printf. And we'll tell it we want to display an integer that is 4 characters wide, and that integer is whatever I times j is. So let's do that now. And that should work a lot better. So here we go. If we want to figure out what is 7 times 3, we'll take 7, 3, and 7 times 3 is 21. Let's go back to our smiley face code and see another example of how we could use a while loop, even though it won't be nested in this case. Initially, we might want to get some input. So instead of displaying 10 smiley faces every time, let's ask the user how happy they're feeling. And we'll say it should be on a scale of 1 to 10. So let's create a scanner. And then we'll say their happy level is whatever they type in next. And then now, instead of always displaying a 10 by 10 block of smiley faces, we can display however many they type in. So if they say 5, we'll display a 5 by 5 block of smiley faces. We'll go up to whatever happy level is. If they just say 8, an 8 by 8 block of smiley faces. It says they should be on a scale of 1 to 10, and right now it lets them type anything. If you type in 100, it's going to display a 100 by 100 block of smiley faces. We might be okay with that, but we also might want to verify and validate their input. Let's do that using a while loop. So we're going to say while the happy level is less than 1, or the happy level is greater than 10. Essentially, we're saying while it's not valid. If it's in the 1 to 10 range, that would be false. But if it's less than 1 or it's greater than 10, it's not a valid number. And we'll display a little bit of an error message. And maybe ask them again. This is kind of a long message, but that's okay. And we'll say our happy level, we'll get that input again. So hopefully the second time they'll input the correct number, but we'll keep repeating until they do. That shouldn't be a for loop because we don't know how many times they're going to need to do this. Hopefully it'll never happen. They'll type in a correct number at the beginning, but maybe they'll keep typing in a wrong number and a wrong number and a wrong number, and we're just going to wait until they type in a correct number. Let's run our program, and if I'm feeling 15, I'm going to get a message, number must be between 1 and 10. Let's try a low number as well, -3. We're going to get the same message. Then let's say 8 and give it a valid number. We should get an 8 by 8 block of smiley faces. So this is one way to validate user input, is to keep repeating and re-asking the user until they give us something valid.